Well, hello everybody. Welcome to lesson 23. We're going to have a bit of fun looking at children's literature and all the things that go with children's literature. So whoa, here's my mouse. Let's jump right in. So, supporting readers. We spent a lot of time talking about readers and developing readers in the classroom. So what we're going to do is focus today on how we can support readers in the classroom through amazing literature. And we want our students to have real books in their hands. And I think sometimes we think, well, we can just give them parts of books, or we can give them excerpts, or we can give them online reading. Yeah, those things are good, but ultimately we want to put real, live, physical books in their hands, because there's something magical about having that tangible turning of the pages and having an unbelievable story be part of your life. So as a teacher, it is your responsibility to put books in the hands of these kids and to put books that they love in the hands of your kids. Reading aloud and putting books that suit the children in their hands are the two most important things that you can do as a literacy teacher, because they will then be these kids who have happy smiles on their face or are so engaged in the book that they don't even know you're there. That's what we want. And to do that, to be able to put books in kids' hands that they love, you need to read aloud children's literature, and you need to know where to get amazing children's literature. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Okay, so book selection guidelines. Basically, in your classroom, you want to have a really rich and extensive set of books so that the kids can read them at any time. You don't want to depend on the library, and you can't depend on sort of their home collection of books. You want to have in your classroom library 1,500 books. Do you start with that when you first start teaching? No. You start with 6. You start with 6 books. You put your little 6 books on the shelf, and then you build from there. You go to garage sales. You go to thrift stores. You go, if a teacher is retiring, you go with your bags and you say, I love books. Give me your books. I will keep them in the hands of children. And most retiring teachers will love you for that. Okay? So 1,500 books is what you're going for. What you start with is 6. Okay, so basically book selection guidelines. What you want to do is you want to meet the needs of the children and the curriculum through the books. In order to do that, you need to understand child development. So if you have a whole bunch of like grade 1 type books and you're teaching grade 6, they're not going to be thrilled, and they will not pick those books, obviously. You want to know the literary quality of books. So what are the good books out there and what are the so-so books? You want to have knowledge of provincial programs of studies so that those books that you pick fit what you are supposed to be teaching, but also expand what you are supposed to be teaching. And so I'll get into that a little bit. You want large and varied genres of books. I'm just going to check here. Yes, you want them to be to have access to lots of genres of books, and we're going to talk about different genres, because if they only stay in one genre, that's what they kind of think all books are. But you want to expand their views. You want to be aware of your own biases and your own values. So, for example, I'm really drawn to nonfiction. So I have to really work hard to bring in fiction books, because as a person, I value nonfiction over fiction, but as a teacher, I have to make sure that I don't bias my students by only reading them nonfiction books and never reading them fiction books. Okay, you want to stay current with issues, stay current with themes, stay current with book publications, with authors, with movies, those kinds of things. Be aware of what kids are excited about reading out in society, and maintain files of policy statements, useful resources, procedures for dealing with challenging materials. And that way you'll know if there are some books that, might have some edgier content that you then have to make decisions about, and maybe you decide that you want to introduce it in a different way than maybe a different book that is not has no big controversies about it. Okay, so those are just some book selection guidelines when you're going through. Okay, different kinds of literature. So these are the kinds of genres that I would suggest you have in any library, in a K, in a grade 3, in a grade 6 library. So again, it's important to have a wide variety of fiction and nonfiction, such as picture books. Again, lots of the books that I've been reading you are picture books. Have those picture books in your library no matter what grade. K, 6, grade 12. Picture books nowadays have some really, really amazing and in-depth themes that you can pull from at any, that you can pull the themes out at different levels, at different grades. And so don't shy away from picture storybooks if you're teaching upper elementary or middle school, because sometimes they are very, very nuanced and very, very deep in their theme. Okay, so you want to have some novels. Basically, children will start to read novels around grade 2, grade 3, and then that will be part of their diet of reading throughout their career. Readability does not, I'm just going to read this. Readability does not depend on the complexity of language alone, but has much to do with the structure of the book and the background experience the reader is required to bring to it. So if you have a novel that is, talking about life in a different country and a child has never traveled anywhere, they're going to find that difficult, not because necessarily the words are difficult, but the theme is difficult. So be thinking about when you're picking those books, what can you do to challenge your students to go beyond what they know, but you might have to preface it a little bit more in there. So there are basically, these are basically the 4 kind of novels that you will most likely find in elementary classrooms. You have contemporary realistic fiction, which is probably the most widely read genre in novels. These are stories like Because of Winn-Dixie, Princess Diaries. Oops, should have been a bracket instead of a underscore there. There's also mysteries, they're often enjoyed by children in upper elementary. Again, think about child development. They're more able to understand the abstractness and put together clues, and they actually like that challenge. So books like The Thief Lord, Silent to the Bone. You have historical fiction, which is fictional characters in a historically accurate context. So Boy in the Striped Pajamas is a great one that talks about Holocaust, but in a really nuanced and I don't want to say child-friendly way, but it pushes enough, but of course doesn't get into all of the horrific details that obviously went on during that time. And fantasy. It engages the reader's imagination and gives free rein really to endless possibility. However, it can be challenging because of the complexity and the sophistication of the ideas embedded within. Again, if you have a child that is not at that stage of really abstract thinking, fantasy will be tricky. So things like The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, even Charlotte's Web is fantasy because, of course, generally spiders and pigs don't chat, but you have to be able to know enough about the story genre to then be able to go to that next level. Okay, there are graphic novels now that are really amazing, and don't assume just because you have given a child a graphic novel that it is an easier reading level. Oftentimes, because there's so few words, sometimes those words are so heavily weighted with meaning that a child at a lower reading level, don't just assume that, oh, it's a graphic novel, I'll give that to a child at a lower reading level. It doesn't always equate. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't always equate in there. So there are lots of really cool graphic novels. I have a couple websites for you to share. Short stories, basically, these are brief, usually fictional narratives that consist of more than just a mere recording of an incident. They have definitely a formal structure, and they have definitely a story arc. Sometimes if you have a child who does especially struggles with reading a full novel, like if they're in grade 5 and they struggle with reading a full novel, giving them a book of short stories, so it looks like they're reading a book, but they're actually reading a short story. They're still getting all of the components of the story, only in an abbreviated form. So they're getting character, they're getting plot, they're getting setting, they're getting rising action, they're getting all of those story characteristics, but just not the length. And so sometimes those are really good for your struggling readers. They're really great as well for your high readers, because they can read a lot of stories and gain a lot of different experiences with different writers, different characters, those kind of things in there. So again, short stories, there's some really great short stories collections out there. One of my favorite ones is called Swan's Sister, and it's a whole bunch of fairy tales, but retold in sort of modern times. You have traditional literature, which is there's like folk and fairy tales, so like traditional Mother Goose. I actually have a link for you to listen to some narrative about the origin of Mother Goose poetry. It's kind of frightening. Mother Goose is, but I think the kids would be super fascinated, especially your upper elementary kids, when you're talking about, oh yeah, this is actually referring to Mary Queen of Scots, who killed a whole bunch of people. Like your grade 6 boys especially will be all over that, and then they'll be into Mother Goose poetry when they probably never would be otherwise. So folk and fairy tales, these are again, bring in some of that Mother Goose. It links into myths and fables as well. So thinking about bringing in some Greek mythology. Again, there's some amazing, actually, let me go grab my Greek mythology book. This is one of my favorite. This is kind of combines graphic novels and Greek mythology. It's Greek Myths for Young Children. It's by Marcia Williams, and it's basically the Greek myths in graphic novel, and actually really well thought through. I've actually used this on some Greek myths that I've been confused about, and I'm like, oh, that's what it is. Okay, so again, bring in some of those myths and fables. They have sort of a mystical kind of feel that might grab some students, where your novels or your picture books might not. And again, we want to think about oral storytelling as, just because it is oral, sometimes we think it's lesser than if it's in print, whereas we know from our indigenous friends and colleagues that oral storytelling is an amazing way to share story and to keep particular stories alive. So when you're thinking about traditional literature, consider bringing in some oral storytelling there. Also, you have information and nonfiction books that you might want to be thinking about putting in their library of 1,500 books. Make sure they're current, make sure they're accurate, and make sure they're appealing to children. So basically you can have, I'm just going to read this again, photo documentaries, how-to books, question and answer formats, experiment activity type books, sequential explanation or survey type books, field guides, biographies, and narrative nonfiction. Do you remember what was it called? Guinness Book of World Records? That would be an information or nonfiction book. I remember those were always super popular. And I think because lots of students never had a chance to read information or nonfiction books, because lots of what was presented to them were probably novels or storybooks. And so those kids who gravitate to, I have one that's called How the Body Works, and it's just it's all like pictures and graphs and numbers, and I've had kids love that book. Richard Scarry books for little ones, for those K-2 that have, the book of cars, and they have all the cars, or book of automobiles, or things like that. So again, have some of those in your classroom. And then we have Canadian literature, because we have some amazing authors and illustrators out there. So why Canadian literature? Again, we want to be, we need representation of our own country when we teach our students. Canada is a cultural mosaic rather than a melting pot, and so we do want to make sure that we have all of those books. We've been talking about this. We want all of those books in our classrooms so that our Syrian refugee child or our Asian Canadian child actually sees themselves in the books, and it's not always sort of this white middle class character that's always the hero kind of thing in there. Okay, and Canadian children need to read about Canadian places and people. I remember reading books, and when there were American references, especially, well, we're going to the Grand Canyon or we're going to New York. It never felt as intimate to me as when they talked about, Calgary or the Rocky Mountain House or Rocky Mountains, let's try, or Toronto or Newfoundland. Like it has a different feel. Also, Canadian literature is really pushing, children's literature is really pushing social norms, and I think helping students address issues that they need to start thinking about as young people, and then they will end up dealing with them as adults. So Courage to Fly is a young African American or African Canadian girl who has to find the courage to sort of get beyond her own socioeconomic situation. And Mom are getting married is exactly what it means, mom and mom. So it's written from the child's point of view, and her mom and her mom's girlfriend are getting married. And then what does that mean? What does that look like? And how does this child process that in lieu of the fact that it's not the social norm as of yet? Okay. If you are looking for books by Aboriginal Canadians, again, there are some just amazing books out there. And this literature actually plays a really valuable role in helping our children understand themselves and how they are seeing the world now. It's a different world now. I think there'll be even more differences that we'll see post-COVID. I think some things have really come to fruition through this COVID time. So again, it helps all children understand themselves and their world. And again, these are some of my favorite Indigenous authors. David Bouchard, we've seen him before. George Littlechild Michael, Aruvula Kusagat, Thomas King, Richard Van Camp, and Thompson Highway. Again, those are, if you're looking for books written by Indigenous Canadians, those would be good authors to start with. Okay, what I've done here is I know that you are done your assignment 2 and that you may not want to go back and add things on, but I would go back and add these next lists of books onto your ePortfolio, just because you will want to refer back to them. So this is the Alberta Education Grade 4 to 12 recommended novel list. So this is actually what Alberta Ed says for novels. This is kind of dated because it's linked to the curriculum, which has not been updated since 1990. So these books are starting to be dated, but they're still real classics in there. So don't dismiss it. Have a look through it. Teacher first top 100 books. Again, this is a list from 1999. But if you want some of those classic books that have sort of stood the test of time with children, this has it. Caldecott winners. So all of these books that I'm reading you, when I say this is a Caldecott winner, this is the list, and this is up to date. Our MHC library has lots of these books. Joanne Mockery is amazing at getting these Caldecott winner books in. So most likely we have the year before's winners, if not the year that we're in the winners there. So again, this is an amazing, I would just take some time and just poke through some of these websites and just see what's out there. Okay, these are comprehensive listings for character building books. If you're doing a resiliency unit, you can go on here and put in resiliency, and then it'll list a whole bunch of books. It saves you a ton of time trying to find books on resiliency. Okay. And ALSC graphic novel list. These are graphic novels that are appropriate for, I think it starts at grade 2 and goes up to grade 5. And again, this is 2019, so pretty recent in here. Okay, so I would just maybe if you haven't stopped already, just stop and go back and look at what's on those lists because it's kind of amazing, the children's literature that's available. Now we're going to jump into, I think this is just kind of fascinating. And I think it's just more information that you know that this is still happening because book selection censorship. We kind of think, no, we don't have censorship on books. Oh yeah, we do. So let's have a bit of a go with this. Selecting materials, this is when so you have to select materials. So we all have to put some kind of criteria. But this is when you have a positive criteria to determine which books to place in a collection. So you're looking at it from a positive point of view. Censorship is when you seek to remove, suppress, or restrict books that are already present in a collection. So just that's the difference between those particular terms. Generally, when there is censorship, it's usually around these particular issues. So same-sex relationships, racism, witchcraft, morality. Excuse me. Usually the morality of the book doesn't uphold the standard morality of the dominant culture that surrounds the school or the library. Inflammatory stories, this is when inciting hatred or controversial points of view, when it's deemed that they're inflammatory. Stereotypes, again, if a certain group of people think that it's not upholding the tradition or the norm, or not upholding a sort of generally middle-class standards, then it's stereotyped into one of those books, and then it's censored. And this is a really interesting freedom to read list if you're interested in looking at some of the books that have been censored over the years. And if we think that it's, censorship happens in the States or in Europe or in China, let's have a look. Here we go. And Tango Makes Three. This is a children's book about penguins where there are two male penguins who want to have a baby and they cannot genetically have a baby. So the zookeeper has an extra egg, and gives it to the two, and Tango is born to these two male penguins. So this is 2006. A parent complained about this picture book for small children in the Calgary Catholic School District, so in Calgary. The book tells the story of two male penguins raising a baby penguin in a zoo on religious grounds. The parent objected to the theme of homosexual parenting. The update was the library asked the Central Office of the Religious Education Department to review the book. Later, the library removed the book from its collection. So it was censored and removed. Let's look at Daddy's Roommate. This is in 2005. During Freedom to Read Week, the Lethbridge Public Library displayed books that had been challenged in North America. The inclusion of Daddy's Roommate in the display prompted one library patron to request the removal of the book from the library. And the complainant said that this fictional children's book, which has a homosexual theme, was not a proper role model for children. The complainant did not pursue this challenge, so the book stayed in the library. But this is in Lethbridge. Okay, so this is not far and away. Censorship is super alive and well in our community. This is Timothy Finley, The Wars. So in 2011, parents complained to the Ontario Blue Water District School Board about the use of this novel in grade 12 English classes. The novel tells the story of a Canadian soldier in Europe during World War I. And this is a pretty common novel that is read in grade 12. One woman objected to the depictions of sexual violence and prostitution. Students and others defended the novel's literary value. The school board's textbook review committee recommended that The Wars be kept in the secondary school curriculum, and the novel remained in the class. Okay, a couple more. Captain Underpants. This was the whole series was challenged because it was perceived as encouraging disruptive behavior, while Captain Underpants and the sensational saga of Sir Stinks-a-Lot was challenged for including a same-sex couple. This is a huge series, and there were a lot of people were upset about this particular series, but it has remained here. And so what we're going to do is in Collaborate, I want you to, what is your opinion on censorship of books in your classroom, library, or school? And when is it appropriate to censor books for children? Or is it ever appropriate to censor books for children? So that's where we're going to have a good rousing discussion in Collaborate on that. So jot down some ideas and be ready to go. So just because I want you to dive into a few of these genres. What I want you to do is the lecture is a little shorter today because I want you to spend some time with these books on the next slide. So I want you to listen to the books on the next slide. Be ready to discuss from the point of view of an elementary student from one of your practicums. So try to get yourself in the head of one of your elementary students. What would draw you to read each of these books? I don't want you to give a recap of the plot, but an overview of the theme, because hopefully all your colleagues will have read them. And then from the point of view of a teacher, how would such books promote literacy? Okay. Plan on spending about 10 to 15 minutes talking about all 4 of these books in Collaborate on Thursday. So here are the books. So one is a picture book called Wolves. One is a graphic novel by Benny and Penny's series. There's a little bit on Mother Goose. So scroll down on this one to the 2-minute video. It's an information on the background of Mother Goose fairy tale. So it kind of tells you the creepy background to these poems. And then I had to include David Bouchard. This one's a little bit long. It's about 12 minutes, but it's him reading, and it's him reading I Am a Raven. And it's just so cool to see him reading his own work. Okay, so that is children's literature. Be ready to discuss these books and to dive into censorship. See you later.